Hello class, my name is Robert Muriuki from the Department of Journalism, School of Social Sciences. And our unit today is BJL2206, Sociology in Communication. Our topic today is nonverbal and intercultural communication. We'll begin our lesson by looking at the objectives that we are going to be going through. And the objectives are as follows. We will define the several selected terms and concepts. Then we will analyze, we'll analyze the importance of intercultural communication in society, and then describe the various cultural differences in society. Welcome. We begin by defining the word culture. We want to know what culture is. And this is a term, an umbrella term, that encompasses the social behavior and norms found in human societies. These are the knowledge, the beliefs, the arts, the laws, the customs, capabilities, and habits. In general, what is found in a society, the habits, the knowledge, the beliefs, as we have seen in the slide. Culture is acquired by human beings through the learning processes of enculturation, because when people are born into a culture, they learn that culture through the processes we are calling enculturation and socialization. They are socialized because there's the social systems and processes. People learn culture, and this is shown by the diversity of cultures across our societies. The other word we want to define is the word communication. The word communication is a Latin word, which means, it comes from a Latin word, communicare, which means to share. And this is the act of conveying meanings from one entity or group to another through the use of mutually understood signs, symbols, and semiotic rules. Semiotic is to do with the language, the syntactics, the rules, the grammar, and so on. The other term we want to define is intercultural communication. This is studying cultures across the different cultures and social groups, or how culture affects communication. When we talk about intercultural communication, we can also refer to that as a cross-cultural communication. The other term we want to define is nonverbal communication, or what is known as NVC. And this is transmission of messages or signals through nonverbal platforms. The eye contact, whether people communicate through direct eye contact, is communication through maybe avoiding eye contact, facial expressions, gestures to do with the movements of the hands and the body, postures, and the distance between two individuals. Cross-cultural understanding is also something we also want to define, and this is the ability of people to recognize and interpret and correctly react to people, incidences, or situations that may be misunderstood due to cultural differences. So when we understand culture through different societies. This is what cultural understanding, cross-cultural understanding is about, that we are able to understand culture across different societies. Intercultural communication calls for intercultural knowledge, which we'll be explaining further in a moment. Intercultural awareness, intercultural sensitivity, and intercultural competence. What do we mean by intercultural knowledge? This is the surface level familiarization with cultural characteristics, values, beliefs, and behaviors. Yes, that the knowledge, we are familiarizing ourselves with the characteristics that are in various cultures, the values also in the different cultures, the differences, the beliefs, and also the behaviors. That is what intercultural knowledge is about. And communicators seek to know this intercultural knowledge so that they can be able to communicate effectively across cultures. The other one is intercultural awareness. Intercultural awareness, although close to intercultural knowledge, is about appreciating the culture internally. The knowledge we were talking about is just about the surface, but the awareness now is appreciating a culture internally. And this may be accompanied by the learner's behavior and attitudes, which will lead to flexibility. People become flexible. People not become rigid in what they believe. They will be flexible and they will be open. This will lead to flexibility and openness when people have that intercultural awareness. Intercultural sensitivity is looking at situations, looking at contexts, and being able to react to them appropriately, being sensitive to cultures, the cultures that are different from ours. Sometimes we may have our predetermined beliefs and behaviors, and we may carry that into other cultures, bringing misunderstanding, bringing problems. But when we are sensitive, interculturally sensitive, then we do not take our predetermined interpretations of situations, whether judging whether something is good, something is right in a culture, whether something is moral, something is wrong, something is immoral. So when we have that intercultural sensitivity, it is good for communication. The other one is intercultural competence, and this is the communicator's ability to work across cultures. It goes beyond knowledge, goes beyond even awareness, but when you have this competence, you have the skills, you have the information, and communication is, a communicator is able to communicate effectively and competently. Intercultural communication, we had defined that earlier. So we can go to the historical background of intercultural communication. There is a scholar known as Abu Rayyan Biruni, and this is the first person to write in detail, to research and write in detail about studies of intercultural communication. In his study, where he did anthropology of religions, peoples, and cultures, he began in the Middle East and the Mediterranean area, and also went to the Indian subcontinent. In the modern era, the person who looked at the modern cross-cultural studies is George Murdoch in his book of 1949, and he set up a number of foundational data sets, including the human relations area files and the ethnographic atlas. During the past decade, the growth of globalization, there has been a lot of globalization. We refer to the world now as a global village. People have migrated a lot through continents, through countries. There's a lot of international tourism, and which has involved very many people going into across cultures. People move to other cultures, and this has brought that knowledge and that people knowing about other cultures. And this is also known as intercultural interaction or international relations. Now we look at cultural barriers to effective communication. One, we have cognitive restraints. Cognitive is about the mind, about how we reason, about how we think. So this can bring the way we have our frames of reference, the way you think, the way we reason, the way you think about other people. This can be a constraint to intercultural communication. And we are saying these are the frames of reference or worldviews that provide a backdrop that all new information is compared to or inserted into. Yeah, we may have that constraint, the cognitive constraint. And this has led to an increased desire and a need for knowledge regarding cross-cultural communication on many levels. Yeah, when we think about what we have talked about, about the cognitive constraints, it has brought some increased desire that we know more about cross-cultural communication. Then there are behavior constraints. How do we behave? In some cultures, it's very difficult to look at some people directly into the eye. In other cultures, if you avoid eye contact, then there is an interpretation on that. So whether people talk about something directly or they go around an issue, that is also another behavior constraint. The other one is how close people stand to one another, whether they stay close, whether they stay far, especially when there are differences in seniority, when there are differences in ages, in age groups, when there are differences in sexes. You know, what is the space? What is the difference? What is the behavior? How do people behave as far as how people stay close to one another when they are talking? And there are also other many rules of politeness. Maybe how do you address a person, a senior person? Do you address a person as a madam or a sir? Or do you address a person as with the first name and so on? These are the behavior constraints that we are talking about. The other one are emotional constraints. How different cultures, how different people in different cultures express their emotions. In some cultures, it's very normal to express one's emotions very openly. It is about anger, throwing tantrums, shouting. If it's about joy, jumping up and down. If it's about love, there are some cultures which express that very, very openly. But in other cultures, expression of emotions is quite hidden. If you are angry, you hide it, you don't express it. This is what the emotional constraints that we are talking about. And all these differences can lead to communication problems. And it's important for us as communicators to be aware of all those potential problems so that we are able to communicate in a better way. Let's look at cross-culture awareness. And this is an essential first step in understanding people. And people in the different countries conduct their lives in different ways. And it's important as communicators to be aware of that and to respect that the way people conduct themselves, the way people conduct their business may be different from the way you conduct yours. But as a communicator, it's important to respect that and be aware of that, and you will be more effective as far as communication is concerned. And we are saying it's better to know the rules than to risk offending other people. And you may even lose a deal in such a situation. And we're saying you have to prepare for that. It calls for preparation, it calls for effort, and it calls for open-mindedness. Now, how do we deal with these differences, the cultural differences that we have talked about, the behavioral, the emotional, and so on? One, we need to learn about other people's ways of doing things. It's important that we research, it's important that we read, it's important that we find out knowledge about other people that we are going to interact with. We need to know how do other people do their business, how are their behaviors, how is their communication, ways of communication. And the other thing we need to know is that we get a feel of the atmosphere of these other people, the attitudes, and the angle their lives have, because they are going to be different. These people are going to be different, so it's important that we learn their ways. We learn their ways, and we respect their ways, and we appreciate that their ways may be different from ours, but it does not mean that they are inferior to ours. The other way to overcome the differences is to observe. Open your eyes. It's important to open your eyes, to observe how people act, how people dress, how people treat each other, what are their table mannerisms, what are their celebrations, what are their heroes. It's important to be observant, to open one's eye, to have an open mind to observe. The other way to overcome is to ask questions. It's important to be inquisitive. Some people fear asking questions because they fear that they may be seen as being ignorant. It is good to ask because through asking, one can be able to learn a lot, one can be able to interact a lot, and that is very good for overcoming the difficulties. The other way is to stay aware of yourself. It's important to be in touch, to know yourself, know your body, know your feelings, understand them, be confident, because when you have this process, you can be more grounded and secure. You can be more confident in your experience with other cultures when you are away from other cultures. Another way is to allow for more time. It's important that you give yourself time to process all the information that you have. Take time to look at things. Take time to process the information you have. Take time to think about your experiences in this culture. And when you talk about time, it's important to realize that people look at time differently across cultures. There are people who we refer to as monochronic. Yeah, that they stick to time. If you talk about 11 o'clock, it is that 11 o'clock and the person becomes very stressed, even if there's a few minutes after 11 o'clock. Other people's culture have what is called polychronic mentality, that if you talk about 2, somebody will think it's the whole of the afternoon, and they may come to an appointment at 4 because that is the afternoon after all. A difference of a few hours may not make a lot of difference to these people. So it is important to be aware of that so that you are able to communicate in a good way. Another one is to invoke humor. It's important to be able to stay away, at least mentally, from situations. Some situations may be very difficult, but it's good to be able to look and get humor from every situation. And you should not overdo that, because people look at humor differently. People look at humor differently in different environments, in different societies, and different individuals who look at humor differently. And this is because new environments, when you travel to new environments, there can be a lot of stress. So it's important to humor yourself, because this stress can limit your flexibility and can also limit your ability to handle intercultural situations. The other thing that we need to think about is you need to think about individual differences. Even when we have societies, even when we are talking about cultures, people are individuals. Even within that culture, we cannot take everybody as the same. There are some people who will behave differently, who will think differently, who will look at things differently. And this is what we are talking about when we talk about individual differences. The values, the behaviors, vary a lot. Yeah, we cannot just put people into one situation, one common situation. We have to look at people differently. The other one is you learn to tolerate uncertainty, because across situations, especially when you are in strange or different cultural situations, there could be uncertainties, and it is very important that we learn to tolerate the uncertainties. And we should try to focus on what we can be able to do. And if there are other things that we may not be able to do, we need to be able to tolerate that. Because some situations, you can imagine you have traveled all the way, maybe to another country, and then whatever you are going out to do is not coming out very well. This uncertainty is the one we're saying we need to be able to tolerate it. The other one is observing punctuality. And sometimes you may need to go even a few days before the appointment. Yeah, if you had an appointment, it's good to give yourself a good time to acclimatize, be there so that you're able to adjust physically, you're able to adjust mentally. It's important to do that so that you're able to adjust yourself. Sometimes the climate may be very different. Sometimes even the living there would be very difficult or different. So it is essential that we make those adjustments if you want to be successful. The other one is to build your intercultural skills. All what we have talked about is important that you put in mind. You look at the awareness, you look at the competence, you look at the sensitivity. All those are the intercultural skills that we are talking about. And the different experiences that you'll have had. This will be able to link the personal development and the learning that comes with that. So it's important to build your intercultural skills. Now let's look at aspects of cross-cultural communication. We have some cultures that are high context, and we have others that are low context, and this is what we want to know about. That high context cultures assume that individuals have a lot of knowledge, and therefore you don't need to give them this little background information that people already know. We expect that this is the high culture. So you may be surprised. You're looking for some details, and then they are not forthcoming because people expect that you know. Whereas in low context cultures, people assume that individuals know very little, and they need to be pumped with information. So you may find that you're being told a lot of little details that you may not really need. So this is why it's important to understand what type of culture is this. Is this a high context culture, or is it a low context culture? The other one is nonverbal, oral, and written. We want to look at nonverbal, oral, and written communication. Nonverbal involves everything that is not verbal, that is not verbalized, that is not in words. Eye contact, gestures, what we have talked about, space, facial expressions, and so on. So this is the nonverbal we are talking about. Then there is another culture about masculinity and femininity. In a masculine culture, in a masculine society, the males dominate. They're supposed to be tough. They're supposed to wield the power, while the women are just unquestioning, they're just obedient, they are humble, and they're supposed to follow whatever they are told. But in a feminine society, the genders are emotionally closer, and competition is not very much endorsed, and the underdog is sympathized with, the children, the women, the underdog. So it's important to understand what type of a culture are you dealing with. Is it masculinity or is it femininity? Another one that we need to learn is about anxiety and uncertainty management. Sometimes when we come across strangers, there is a constraint in communication, and some people may have uncertainty, they may have anxiety. So it's important to be able to deal with that, to deal with anxiety and uncertainty. Especially as a stranger, you need to manage your uncertainty as well as anxiety to be able to communicate effectively with the hosts. And it's important to look at the situation and look at this anxiety, this uncertainty, because it will help you to predict the behavior of your host. Let's look at eye contact as a way of communication. Across different cultures, eye contact is looked at differently. Like we had said a little earlier, in some cultures, when you hold the stare of somebody or when you look somebody directly into the eye, it may be interpreted as confidence, as honesty, as trust, and so on. But in the same cultures, when you avoid eye contact, you may be viewed as dishonest, you may be viewed as lying, you'll be seen as shifty, a shifty person, somebody who cannot be trusted. So the same in other cultures. When you look somebody in the eye, it's seen like you are challenging the authority, you are disrespectful, and so on. And in the said culture, when you avoid eye contact, you may be seen as being respectful, as humble, and so on. So it's important to know this culture, how do they look at eye contact as a way of communication. And in communication, especially interpersonal communication, the eye will be very central. So how does this culture look at eye contact? Do they expect that you hold their stare? Do they expect that You don't look at them straight in the eye. It's important to look at that and understand. The other one is about facial expressions. Facial expressions are usually universal across different cultures, and they give us different meanings and different emotions. And the emotions may be, facial expressions may convey anger, they may convey fear, they may convey sadness, they may convey happiness. And facial expressions, there's not very much that we can be able to do about them because it is not within our control. But it's important to remember that even facial expressions is a way of communication. The other one is gestures. And for gestures, we have broken them into 5 subcategories. One, we have the emblems. We'll be explaining that later. We have illustrators. There are regulators. There are affect displays, and also adopters. Emblems are sign languages. Sign languages, as far as gestures are concerned, emblems are sign languages, like when you put a thumbs up, when you want to congratulate somebody. And this is quite recognized. So the emblems. The others are illustrators. Illustrators mimic what we speak. For example, if there is a speaker and then you are gesturing to them. The time left, maybe the people are already bored with the talk. Then you could raise up some fingers to show the time that is left. That is an illustrator. Regulators, they act as a way of conveying meaning through gestures. For example, raising one's hand may indicate that one has a question. Raising one hand. This is a regulator. The other one is affect displays. This is about emotions, about happiness, about sadness. When we smile, that's an affect display showing happiness. When we scold, that's an affect display, maybe showing anger. Then tears showing sadness, and so on. The other one are adopters. Adopters are more subtle, and these are like a yawn, or when you raise up a fist, a clenched fist in anger. Then we want to look at proxemics, and this is communication dealing with space, the space around us. We had earlier alluded to that there is personal distance, that some people may not come close, too close, or some people may need to come very close. There is that question of distance. And there's also distance of objects, distance of buildings, distance of so on. Although also this can be a way of communication. So there are 3 types of space. There's feature-fixed space. We'll be explaining that soon. There is semi-fixed feature space, and there is informal space. In feature-fixed space, this is how cultures arrange their space on a large scale, maybe about buildings, about the parks. If you go to an amusement park, how is the space? About buildings, how are buildings spaced, and so on. For informal space, this is the space that we put a lot of importance on. The one I've talked about interpersonal, about space to our seniors, and so on. The other one is semi-fixed feature space. This is how we arrange. We arrange things inside the buildings that we have talked about. So how is the placement? The placement maybe in an office. How are the desks placed? How are the chairs? Where are the plants? How are these spaced? Then we want to look at oral and written communication. And this is generally not very difficult. It's easier to learn because it depends on a language and depends on how one has learned oral and written communication. Then we want to look at stereotypes and generalizations. Stereotypes is especially when we assume that all members of a particular culture, for example, have the same characteristics. Is when we label membership of a culture, such as a race, or a religion, or ethnicity, or age, or gender, or even a national culture. We can stereotype, say that these people are like this, these people behave like this, this gender behaves like this. This is what we are calling stereotypes. Sometimes there can be positive stereotype, and there can also be negative stereotypes. Negative stereotypes is what is usually very common, but positive stereotypes are not very common. You know, when we look at positive stereotypes, that we assume that the characteristics of this kind of a culture or this kind of group is positive, that we look up on, is what is called positive stereotype. But for negative stereotype is when the characteristics are disrespected, are hated, and so on. Stereotypes are problematic because they give us a false sense of understanding of our communication partners. There's that misunderstanding when we label people and say they are like this, they are this. And whether it's positive, like we had seen, or negative, it is usually only partly correct. It's never correct, because you cannot put everybody, every culture into a compartment and label it, or you cannot put individuals into a compartment and label them as this or the other. And we see that stereotypes are usually self-fulfilling prophecies where we observe others in selective ways that confirm our prejudices. And with that, class, we come to the end of our lesson. Thank you very much.
These televised lectures supplement our robust online learning going on our MKU online platform. You can view more on our televised lectures via our online platform. We are in a digital era. and Mount Kenya University knows this. The following are the steps to follow so as to complete your online application. Download the application form from the website www.mku.ac.ke. Attach copies of your academic certificates and ID. Pay the application fees via M-Pesa pay bill number 270988. Your ID is the account number. 2,000 shillings is the charge for a postgraduate. You can also deposit in the bank accounts provided on the website. Then email all the above to apply@mku.ac.ke.